Hello, audience, and happy Monday. Coming up for you on your work week is a little bit of Crusades content, which I have noticed over the last year and a half or 2 years of running this podcast that no one can seem to get enough of. And I am joined today, meaning a week ago, by Danny Bessner and Derek Davidson of the American Prestige podcast, which will be known to Cold War heads and American foreign policy wonks such as yours truly, and then Eleanor Yanega and Luke Waters of the We're Not So Different medieval history podcast. They have teamed up, joined forces for a 10-part premium series called Welcome to the Crusades, and their first season is about the First Crusade. I would encourage anyone interested in heading over to their website and giving it a look. And now, without any further ado, the first quintet to have appeared on the History of Philosophy audio archive, I present the First Crusade. It is Monday, April 4th, and I am joined by the hosts of the American Prestige and We're Not So Different podcasts, Danny Bessner and Derek Davidson from American Prestige, and Eleanor Yanega and Luke Waters from We Are Not So Different. We are gathered today to discuss what else but the Crusades. So just to get things off the ground, this is a story with so many different characters, so many different motivations, and to sort of jump into the time period without getting totally overwhelmed by detail, let's just look at some of the principal groups involved. So I wanted to start by looking at just the Franks and the Normans. Who are they? Where do they come from? How do they enter the story?
And actually, before I know Eleanor was supposed to go first, we even decided it. But I should say we collaborated on a Crusade series that you could find at welcometothecrusades.com. So everyone check that out, welcometothecrusades.com, where we go deep on the First Crusade. I'm sorry to cut you off, Eleanor, but there you go.
Oh, Thank you. At this man. He can mark it. I love that.
Yeah, the plug is straight up. All right.
I love this for us. So this is a great question, because I think that for a lot of people, we have a tendency to think about the Middle Ages as though it's just like now, except further back in time. And you are bang on in that nationalities are not so much a thing. And we are talking more about kingdoms and principalities and differing groups of people. So the Franks, more or less, roughly correspond to being French people. But not French people in the way that you would think of them now. So, for example, if you're down in like Occitan or something like that, like around Languedoc, these people do not speak French. They do not consider themselves French. They have to be like forcibly amalgamated into the crowd. So the Franks are often people who, like, the most French one can be is being around Paris, right? Like that's the epicenter for Frankness, right? And then the Normans are Frenchified Vikings. Right. So by the time we get to the Crusades, they have settled their shit down very, very slightly, to use that's a historical technical term. But initially, the term Normandy comes from Normandy. So like Northmen who would just come, and they would come down the Seine Valley every summer just to do some pillaging, steal your stuff, take whoever they wanted, and then go back up to Scandinavia. And then one year they were like, screw it, I'm tired of the commute. I'm just going to settle here instead. And essentially, they get brought under the auspices of the French crown by them saying, okay, yeah, we are going to use you to fight the other people up north that we don't really get on with. So like the Bretons, who similarly do not consider themselves to be French, right? And they say, if you just Christianize, please accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, we will grant you this parcel of land and you could fight people for us. And they say, yeah, great, fantastic, I'll do it. And just for some context here, this is so late on in the medieval period that we're talking that this is William the Conqueror's granddad, right? So this is we're talking a 10th century, 11th century. This isn't particularly far back in the mists of time. The trouble with Normans is that that worked really well for them, right? Showing up being dickheads and then being like, oh, I don't know, we're Christians now, you can't make me go, is that they really do end up taking over rather a lot of places because they have this kind of we're going to get out there and we are going to conquer things attitude. Quite famously England, but also they do it in Sicily. They do it in like southern Italy. And the thing with Normans is that they're not very nice to have as neighbors because they're always trying this on. And in a way, one of the things that happens, especially with the First Crusade, is that people are like, we got to make these guys go somewhere. Like, we got to get these guys out of our backyard. And you hit this kind of high point in the 11th century, and it will continue up into the 14th century when things go horribly wrong with the plague and things like that. We have a really kind of high standard of living happening in Europe. People are trying to calm stuff down. They don't want to do so much infighting because everybody's Christianized now. It's absolutely fine. Well, not everybody's Christianized, like shout out to Estonia, but most people are Christianized, right? And so they're like, we have to kind of find somewhere to make the worst guy you've ever met, like the fail son of a fail son, who is a really good fighter, go somewhere. And that's what's going on with Franks and Normans, essentially.
Fantastic. Yeah, the Normans have always seemed like this group that just went on like a multi-century rampage, that started in Europe and then eventually ended up, in the Middle East. And just to be clear, that is the group of people you refer to as the quirked up white boys in the series. Okay.
Yes, indeed, the quirked up white boys. And
Yes.
I think that you'll find that never has a group of white boys had quite so much quirk. So, one of the first to ever do it.
Yeah, and this leads rather naturally into the second question, which is, what is the problem in Europe to which the Crusades are the solution? I've heard the Crusades discussed as a kind of pressure relief valve for, as you said, this superabundance of fail sons who are not set to inherit the estate, as well as a way of taking all of the Christian on Christian endemic violence and directing it somewhere else. So what is the economic and military situation in Europe, and how does it lead to the Crusades?
Well, there are a number of reasons, and a big thing about the Crusades is that there's the Council of Clermont, where Pope Urban II preaches the First Crusade, and it all spreads outward from there. But a big thing is that we don't have a first-hand account of someone who was writing down what he said as he said it. Stuff came later, stuff was passed down. Some of our accounts are from a few years after the fact, but there's kind of broad scholarly agreement that his reasoning was a combination of needing an outlet for the second sons of Europe and the third sons, for them to be able to go somewhere, so they weren't continually fighting their own relatives in their own backyards and causing them huge problems. This is very easy to see from the Normans following the Norman conquest of England and the family of William the Conqueror, because William the Conqueror famously conquered England. That's how he got the name. And then when he had kids, he gave Normandy to his son, Robert Curthose, and he gave the island of England to his son, William Rufus. And then William Rufus and Robert Curthose decided to fight about it for a number of years, and it caused huge problems and lots of death and disease and everything in both England and sometimes in Normandy as well. And the Pope was like, hey, you two, stop this. And so he sent a legate up there and got Robert Curthose. He brokered a deal where William Rufus would give them a bunch of money, and Robert Curthose himself would leave and go to the Holy Land, and that resolved that issue. In addition
Luke,
to that,
I actually got a question. Can I ask you something? Because I'm curious. Why do
Sure.
these guys if you have Normandy and you have England, why not just be satisfied with it? Like, is this just, as a realist would say, the human need to dominate? Like, why even fight over this shit? Like, your life is better than so many people at the time, like inconceivably so.
I mean, I think that I don't know that it's a human need to dominate, but I think that once people with a bunch of power get to that power, they start to see, oh, I could take that. Oh, that should be mine. Oh, and I mean, from this perspective, I guess I can see what Robert Curthose is saying, because he's older than William Rufus, and he's like, hey, what the hell, man? Dad, what's going on? Because England, while it was still a backwater at the time, I mean, you still made a lot of money off of the wool, and I mean, it was a big, huge island you could call your own. And so I think it was just, the same reason that America, looks out for, foreign entanglements to get involved in, whether, we have a real relationship to them or not. I think it's, that same kind of strain of reaction and domination you get from, reactionary political elements, wherever they may be. The other things that came up in the speech were wanting to reunite Christendom after the East-West Schism, which was a big thing, something that Urban and a few of his predecessors had talked about, as well as the Byzantine emperors as well. There was wanting to retake the Holy Land as what we would see as kind of a colonial venture, which also necessarily entailed opening up the Holy Land to more pilgrims, because while they hadn't been fully foreclosed, the pilgrimage routes had been under siege somewhat in the years leading up to this, and they wanted to stop that and make the pilgrimage routes completely safe. And then, I mean, also, spread the gospel, find other land, make inroads for Roman Catholicism into Eastern Europe and into the Levant and the Holy Land. And I mean, if you take Jerusalem, you're like the big dog, like if you're the Pope that takes back Jerusalem, you're like the big hot shit. You're like, and Urban II wanted to make a name for himself. And I mean, it is kind of funny that he died after the siege of Jerusalem concluded, but 2 weeks before the news actually got to Rome. So, I mean, he did it, but he didn't live to see it. And I mean, I think it's a combination of all those things. I can't really tell how much it is, but those are all things that are kind of mentioned at the accounts of the Council of Claremont that we have. And I mean, there was all that kind of stuff. And there was also just this idea that like they were going to, I mean, we're gonna teach the heathens the gospel. The same song and dance Europeans, and well, I mean, not just Europeans, but marauding religious people have done since time immemorial. We're going to teach the heathens, the pagans, the heretics, the truth. So I think it's a combination of a lot of those things, both material factors, spiritual factors, and then of course crass worldly things as well.
Did the Crusaders feel themselves to be responding in any way to the Arab conquests of like the Iberian Peninsula that had gone on and things like the Battle of Tours? Or was that like so far back that it shouldn't really be conceived of in that way?
Oh, this might be a good one for Derek, really.
I mean, the Reconquista in Spain is the model for what the Crusades become. There are calls that go out as the I don't know, Eleanor, what do we call these people? They're not Spaniards yet.
Yeah,
what do we call them?
that's the thing is that at this point in time, you have Valencians and Granadans.
Yeah,
and
exactly. They're so
Iberians. I tend to call them Iberian because
the local
Iberian. That's good. Although the Arabs and Berbers
were
were Iberians too at that point, I guess. But as they're besieging these cities that are controlled by or have become have fallen into Muslim control, there are calls that go out for Christian knights and warriors and good spiritual people all over to come and help, and that's basically the concept that gets applied to the Crusades. So it is in some sense a response to that. I think Tours probably is a little old, but the Franks certainly have this historical memory of saving Christendom from the onrushing, hordes or whatever you want to say. I mean, the main precursor, obviously, is the trouble with the Byzantine Empire after the Battle of Manzikert, and that's where the appeal comes from. And that's the Turks, the Seljuk Turks, moving into Anatolia and the Imperial Heartland, which is at the point at which they appeal to the West for help.
Right. And sorry, go ahead, Luke.
I was just going to say that they used the Siege of Barbastro as after the Siege of Barbastro, which is in 1063, that was used as kind of a proof of concept for what was going to happen. But at the time, the Reconquista, as we understand it now, had it really formulated. Yeah, the Christian regions of the Iberian Peninsula were trying to push the Muslims out, but they were also feuding with one another. They were doing that. It hadn't really coalesced into like the Reconquista movement that we have, and it wouldn't until after the Crusades got going, when they would then use the Crusades as an example for what they wanted to do in Spain. So it was like they got the idea from Spain in the first place, and then they implemented it, and then Spain reused the idea that had come from them in the first place in like a weird circular idea structure.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think that a thing that I hasten to point out when we're talking about the Reconquista is like, the term is not a medieval one. You know,
Yeah.
no one's going
Yeah,
around
it's-
saying, "Ooh, Reconquista." It's like this is Franco's doing, and
Right.
anti-Franco
jeez.
action. So it's complex in that I think medieval people, especially in the area, see themselves, yes, in competition with Muslims, but whether or not anyone else cares that much about what's going on in Spain, doubtful. There's a bit of like using things like the Battle of Tours to kind of like gild one's own lily to say, oh yeah, this is why the Franks are like this noble group of Christians who fight for things, But I think also from the standpoint of the church and from the standpoint of the papacy, it's a lot more interesting to go for Jerusalem because Jerusalem's like the big prize. As Luke mentioned, every Christian in the Middle Ages hopes one day to go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Pilgrimage has been a little bit messed up because of the incursions of the Ottomans. So that's something to do. I mean, I guess also one of the things to consider is one of the problems, she says in air quotes, in an audio medium, is that is happening at this point in time is that the Pope has just become important. Right. The
Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah. So like the papacy now, we tend to think, oh, it's this all crushing juggernaut. But in the earlier medieval period, for quite some time, the popes are the bishops of Rome. And they spend, a good 500 years going, dog, we're so important. Guys, wow, we are important. And writing tons and tons of books about how important they are, like the Liber Pontificalis, things like this, where they're literally just writing a papal history to talk about how important they are. But you'll have like 2 popes, you'll have 3 popes. They're sitting in different graveyards in Rome writing letters about how the other one's the fake pope and they're the real pope. In Constantinople, everyone was like, dog, I cannot stress how much you are not the boss of me. And nobody said you ever were. For quite some time, that like the churches of the Levant are as important as Rome, if not more important. So what sort of happened by the 11th century is finally, after hundreds upon hundreds of years of attempting to prove to everyone that they are this important factor, they've finally done it, and they kind of celebrate by having a crusade. Because one of the things that they're attempting to do is say, we have power over the kings and emperors. This is something that we could do. Let us consider that they kind of see themselves as a state of God on earth. And what do states do at the time? Well, they commit violence, right? Like that's the thing that you can do is you can raise an army when you are a leader of something. So to an extent, what is happening here is the papacy is proving that they can raise an army to do what they want. And indeed, they are seeing this as a way of perhaps taking back over Constantinople. They are really smarting from the East-West schism because they keep pretending they're like, at any moment, everyone in Constantinople is going to admit that we're really the most important people when they're not. So one of the things that is happening here is the papacy is essentially testing the waters to see what it is they can get rulers to do. And to their credit, it turns out rather a lot. But especially if they think that there's something in it for them. So
I'm reminded of this probably apocryphal story from the Second World War about Stalin, where somebody suggested to him that he send out some feelers for support from the Catholic Church. And Stalin replied, "The Pope? How many divisions does he have?" And
yeah, there's a few of those throughout history where people basically say Andrew Jackson said that about the Supreme Court when they ruled against, I believe it was the 1830 Indian Removal Act. He's like, let him enforce it. Let them enforce it, right?
John
this is
Marshall
something that
has
repeats.
made his opinion known. Now let him enforce it.
Yeah,
Something
exactly.
like
the
that.
irony
Wow,
here is that
Luke,
the
you knew
Pope
the whole
actually,
one. Very good. You get an
Pope
A.
actually sort of does have divisions in this time. So
The Swiss Guard, or whatever.
yeah, sure. Fantastic outfits, by the way. one of my favorites.
True.
They are some quirked out white boys.
Okay,
That
a
is-
friend of mine, when she was doing study abroad in Rome, made out with one of them in uniform, and I'm just
Wow.
like, "Thank you for your service, babe. Like, living the dream."
50
So,
points.
Hold my halberd. I have to make out.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so one way we can sort of tell the Crusade story is in terms of what people wanted and what people got. So let's start with Alexios Komnenos, right? Who kind of sends up the flare gun after getting rinsed at the Battle of Manzikert and says, "Okay, we need help. We need knights specifically to come in and help firm up this border issue that we're having." So what did Alexios Komnenos want, and what did he get?
He wanted he wanted a discreet band of warrior nobles, mostly knights, to come over, lend him their services in taking back basically all of Anatolia, modern day Turkey. And then he wanted them to leave and go home or hang out in Jerusalem or whatever, because he didn't care about holding Jerusalem. It was too far south for him. He basically wanted everything down to Antioch and kind of everything over to Edessa, which is modern day Armenia. And that is what he wanted. And I mean, to be fair, that is what he had suggested to the Pope. And the Pope had been like, yeah, there seems to have been correspondence to the effect of, yeah, we're going to send our knights and hire peasant warriors over to help you out, and you guys can have Jerusalem, and maybe we'll get back together, kind of like you do with your ex who you really want to get back with, and then that'll be that. And that was his whole thing. Please just send some people over. We don't need all of this craziness. And to the Pope's credit, he really, basically, the Pope had a slightly larger coterie that he wanted. He wanted it to be warrior nobles, so basically knights, some infantry, lower nobility, and very lower nobility, and higher end peasants. The priests and bishops who go along with them to carry, to basically keep them in line, because it's a bunch of warriors on the move, worried about them raping and pillaging and, going to sex workers, et cetera, et cetera. And then noble women who had escorts. And it's like, okay, I mean, sure, I guess, why not? They want to see the world. They want to do their pilgrimage to Jerusalem, like, fine. But what they got was the single biggest outpouring of public support in Europe to that point in the Middle Ages, and definitely the biggest one since the Roman Empire had been a thing. And probably the biggest social movement in people west of India or China in the world, because all told, in all of the armies that got together, there were between 200 and 240,000 people who went. That includes knights, that includes peasant warriors, that includes a shitload of bishops, some of whom were warriors and took up arms. That includes 70,000 peasant camp followers, which included not just like normal peasants, people who could like do a job. That included sex workers, that included random women, that included the sick and the infirm, people who were missing legs. There are accounts of people who were missing legs being dragged on carts there, because if you went, you got remission of sins. If you go and you die, you go to heaven. The Pope said it, and if the Vicar of Christ says it, it has to be true. And these people were filled with an insane fervor that would never be replicated in any popular crusade movement again. Even to go to the New World, if you want to call that a crusade, it's still not the same thing. This popular outpouring is just, it was a social movement, and it's a social movement that completely broke the superstructure of the Middle Ages for this brief period, for like one snap, it did. And you were able to tell your landlord, you were able to tell your liege lord to fuck off because so many people in the city were like clamoring for people to go save Christendom and save the East, that your landlord couldn't say anything without being hit by an angry mob. It's kind of incredible, to be honest.
One thing I do want to ask the two medievalists about is this question that comes up about whether we as moderns can actually imagine the intensity of religious feeling among medieval people at this time. And I see two head shakes here.
No.
Because
No.
you read accounts of what people did and said, and it just seems completely off the scale, right?
Yeah. I mean, because the thing is, you've got to put yourself into a world that is entirely religious, right? There isn't a real concept of atheism at all whatsoever. And indeed, the way that medieval Europeans see themselves is not as Europeans. They would just say, I'm a Christian, I live in Christendom. And the places that there are in the world are Christendom and everybody else, right? And, you will hear them refer to Muslims as, infidels or things like this. But they're kind of like, I don't know, you got Jews who they're not good people because they aren't Christian. You've got Muslims and they aren't good people because they're not Christian. And then you have pagans? Question mark, which is sort of everybody else that you lump in together. And they really very much are stewed in this particularized society. Now, does that mean that people don't exploit that religious sentiment and they don't use it in order to do things? Absolutely not. But I think it's really important, when I'm like, oh, you got to get rid of all these Normans because they're causing havoc in your backyard. That's at play. But the reason why you can get them to go is everybody believes in this stuff. Everyone absolutely thinks that they're going to get remission of their sins for going on this crusade. And so that kind of papers over some cracks for people who, really do kind of see themselves as not necessarily being on the right side of God. Because that's another thing that we don't really understand. They're so religious at the time that there is rather a lot of hand-wringing on the part of the wealthy and powerful, and a lot of them being like, yeah, but you're going to hell, right? Like, I mean, it's purgatory at the very least for you because you do violence, you attack other people, you're rich and you're hoarding wealth. They take the Christianity part really seriously. So this is a real way from the point of view of the wealthy, for them to kind of square the circle where they can retain their power, retain their wealth, and indeed perhaps expand that, whilst also at the same time getting a get out of jail free card for all of the bad stuff they're doing as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I would simply add to that I think that for us, we cannot experience religion in the same way. That doesn't mean people today who are religious are worse in any way. That's clearly not the case. It means that for them, the overarching religion was the end all be all. Basically, everybody you knew around you believed in this religion. They believed that when you died, there was a literal heaven and a literal hell, and you're going to one of them, and your works in life count for something. And there was no alternative, because now, even if you decide you hate being a Protestant but you're like, I still believe in God, you can become a Catholic. You can become a different kind of Protestant. You can become a certain type of Jew. You can become this. You can become there are a million things you can become. Back then, there was no alternative. It was illegal to change religions in most places in Europe. It was illegal to do that, to the point that when people did forced conversions on Jews during pogroms, those Jews didn't get to convert back to Judaism legally after the fact. In the eyes of the state, they were still technically Christians. It's so pervasive and so incredible that, they didn't do it. And Daniel brought up a really good point when we were doing the series about how you wouldn't be able to get people to do these kind of wars and go through these hardships and walk through the fucking awful baking desert in armor if it wasn't a holy war. Nobody's going to do that. There's not a nation state that can command that at the time. It's just not a thing. Yeah.
And there are cases where that religious fervor seems to have military significance, like in the case of breaking out of Antioch and the Spear of Longinus
Yes.
and so forth, where it almost appears to be like a pure momentum play on religious zealotry and belief that, we actually have a sign of divine favor. But I want to go through just a few of the battles now. So let's talk first about Dorylaeum. One of the points that's made about Dorylaeum, which kind of begins as this encounter battle, and the Crusaders come and work together and effectively win their first battle. But it also happens at this old Roman site, and there is a feeling of like we're taking part in the heritage of the Roman Empire by converging on this place. And also I want to invite like Danny and Derek to comment on this other point, which is, there's the Crusades as a historical event that really happened, about which we know these details and so on. And then there's the Crusades in the historical imaginary of, people in Western Europe that want to see it as like the founding event of this unifying civilizational project where Christianity, develops a military arm and starts to spread throughout the world. And that all of these notions end up ideologically linked of like Romanness, Christianity, whiteness, Western European identity. So I know that's a big ball of string, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Derek, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, maybe, or maybe we should start with just the significance of the site. I mean, there's a practical significance to it because it's a place that people know. It's an old trading outpost that everybody kind of recognizes as a crossroads. And so the idea is like the Crusaders aren't marching together, they're marching in cohorts, but they can all regroup at this place that they are aware of. Like there's a practical element to this. I don't think they set out to like, let's make our stand at Dorylaeum because this was important to the Roman Empire. Like this is just a convenient landmark. But Eleanor, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're right. That's 100% in play. Dorylaeum is supposed to be kind of like the Constantinople breadbasket. It's just like, if you don't control this, then what are you? Like this is a massive like psychic damage for Constantinople, who very much, if you ask them, now we call them Byzantium. But you got to understand that at the time they're like, hello, we are Rome.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Roman Empire. And it's like, babe, you can't even control Dorylaeum. Like, what kind of empire are you? You can't even get across
I mean, they didn't even have
Bosphorus.
Nicaea. Like, this comes after Nicaea. The Crusaders have to
like,
take that first. And that's,
Nicaea, which is
you can
basically a
see it
suburb.
from basically from Constantinople. Like, it's within Island. So, yeah, I mean, it's about rebuilding the empire to some extent. I think to your point about the historical imaginary or what we think of the Crusades today, or what later people thought of the Crusades, this is one of the two, to me, engagements of this first crusade, which, let's be clear, is really the only successful. I mean, really the only successful one. Like, there are claims, you can make arguments about a couple of other ones that they achieved this or that, but really, it just unalloyed success. This is the only one. There are a couple of engagements that really define it, and I think Antioch is the big one. But Dorylaeum, to me, is also significant because of the way that it's fought. Because you have one of Eleanor's quirked up, the most quirked up white boy, Bohemond, who knows that knows that the Seljuks are out there and like stalking his army, but manages to stumble into a trap anyway, and gets the vanguard.
He didn't put up any. He didn't send out scouts. He didn't put up guards. He knew how to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to yell. He knew he was a very good.
Luke gets very emotional about
military.
This kind of
he was a very good field general, but the mistakes he would make, like, boggle the mind of how this man survived this.
I think we called him a himbo, right? I mean, he's basically a himbo.
Oh, he's huge himbo. Absolutely, yeah.
So, I mean, he stumbles into this trap and is badly outnumbered. Now, admittedly, the Crusaders are wandering around the Near East in the dead of summer in plate armor, so That has its ups and downs, but it enables them to survive the onslaught of horse archers from the Seljuks. But still, they are badly outnumbered. The rest of the Crusader army is still hours away from getting to this place, but they hold the line. And part of it is Bohemond's ability as a general, but I think part of it is also you have to say they're committed to this fight. Like, they're committed to what they believe is a righteous religious cause. Otherwise, like, why would you stay there and get pelted with arrows? This is not your home. This is not a place that you have any. I mean, if you're in the rank and file, maybe you have some little hope of looting something or bringing something back that could be worth something. But really, like, you're not going to wind up with a tract, with a kingdom or anything like that. You're fighting in a strange place with very little hope of material gain, and people are shooting arrows at you in a battle that you're maybe not going to win. Like, why would you stick that out unless you really believe that this was what you needed to be doing at that particular time? So to me, that and the tenacity at Antioch, which again is forced on them because they do some very stupid things, but still there is this sense of like, we're sticking this out. We're not running. A few of them do, but not the bulk. And I think that creates this image of the Crusaders, the Crusade as an enterprise that's worth celebrating in the medieval mind and beyond.
Yeah. Certainly what most people know about the First Crusade is that it's the only one that worked. And then maybe as well the story about digging up the Spear of Longinus in the church basement in Antioch. So can we talk just a little bit, go into story time with what happened at Antioch and how that worked out for the Crusaders?
Oh my God!
Well,
try
of
to
course,
stop
we go
us.
into serious detail on the show. Welcome
right.
to thecrusades.com. So everyone check that out.
I think that this is Luke's favorite. So, Luke, do you want to tell a story?
So the conditions at Antioch were so bad after they successfully took the city because they were let in by a betrayer. They were inside the city, but they didn't control all of it because the citadel for the city was high in the mountains that Antioch was abutted against. And so the city leaders still controlled up there. And by this point, a relief army of a guy named Kerboga had arrived, and it was 40,000 strong. They were situated outside the walls, and the situation was existential for those inside. It became completely apocalyptic. There were, after the slaughter of the remaining inhabitants that happened at first, then they started kind of turning on each other very they turned on each other to such a degree that people just fled. They went over the walls. They were leaving. Bohemond and Adhemar, the papal legate who was the spiritual leader of everything, had to close the doors and say, look, we're either all going to die together or we're going to win. You're not going to keep slipping out of the city. And so they're like, okay, cool. Now that the gates are closed, the situation inside was still apocalyptic because these people still looked like they were going to die. They had no food and no way to get any. They were cut off and had been besieged from where they were. And this led to a host of visions, not just from Peter Bartholomew, who was the one who had the most famous, who had the vision about the Holy Lance, but several others. And, the visions would come up. And to my mind, this is perfectly understandable to people who have a pervasive belief in an all-powerful God and a real heaven and a real hell. When they face the end of their rope in such horrifying conditions, it is going to turn, and they're going to start seeing fantastic visions. And Peter Bartholomew either really had a vision or not. I can't really speak to that, but he said that they would find the Spear of Longinus in the ground in the church, I believe it's Church of St. Peter, there in Antioch. And so the upper nobility, like the leaders, didn't really believe him, but a couple of them did. So they're like, fine, we're going to go check this out. So they go and start digging, and Bartholomew had said that it would just be kind of like slightly in the ground there. Well, by they started in the morning. By midday, they've dug a hole that's so deep that it's over your head and it's still not there. And so they bring Bartholomew in, like, for what reason, I don't know, but they bring him in and they're like, where is it? And he's like, oh, I'll find it. You guys just haven't looked hard enough yet. Drops down there, comes back up a minute later with an arrowhead that was later said to be reminiscent of the arrowheads or the spearheads that people in Antioch would have had at the time. But because these people were so insane with grief and fear and terror and hunger, they were like, no, that they set aside all of their cynicism and doubt, and they said, that's the spear of Longinus. That's the real thing. And we're going to march behind it. We're going to use this like a fucking talisman in an RPG that you play where you get special bonus powers from it. I'm not kidding. Adamar himself, who did not believe it was the real Spear of Longinus, mostly because he had already seen one that looked like a period accurate one in Constantinople that was supposed to be the real relic and had been like, the Catholic Church had like said that, yeah, that's the real one before. So he didn't believe this. But he marched right beside Peter Bartholomew, who was holding the lance on a stick himself. And he marched out there because all of those people believed that it was. And he was like, I got to use this. I got to use this. And so they did it. And they won at Antioch. And historians who focus on this say that it literally did save the army. Finding this thing and the belief in it really did save this army until they won at Antioch, and then they had to figure out what to do. And Bohemond said, fuck that, I'm staying right here. I'm taking this for myself. And then it all went to shit. And a few weeks later, Peter Bartholomew was accused of being a liar and was forced to undergo a trial by fire, wherein he was burned by red hot pokers, like some real Game of Thrones ass shit. And because he died 12 days later from sepsis, that meant that the spear was a fake, and everybody was worse off for knowing that fact because it helped break them. Also, Adamar dying and Bohemond being an ass. But I find it one of the most interesting things in the world because it is an example of human beings manifesting stuff they imagine or believe, whatever you want to call it, into the real world. And that's what they did in this case. These people who were emaciated, barely had a few hundred horses to their name, went out and beat an army that was 10 times their size. Now, is that partially because a lot of them drifted away because there was internal fighting between them and a bunch of other factors? Yes. However, they still did win at Antioch when they shouldn't have. They should have been easily routed by Kerboga. And it's so insane to me. I love it.
That's actually who Bart Simpson is named after. Guys, I actually have to go quickly. So, William, if you want to ask me anything,
I honestly, okay, this is no, I do have a question. It's not at all about the Crusades though, so I am putting it in at a weird angle here. But you have any solid reading recommendations for U.S. Cold War foreign policy, like 1945 to 1950? That's kind of my thing right now. So
yeah, well, I mean,
who's
this
good
is
for
very
that?
related to the Crusades. What would be a good one? Yeah, the classic one is Mel Leffler's Preponderance of Power. Check that out.
Cool. That one's been top of the shelf for a while.
Yeah,
so
do that one.
Absolutely going to read that. Okay, that's it. That's
all right. Bye, guys.
The other thing that I wanted to say is my favorite thing about that particular spearhead thing also is though after undergoing the trial by fire, being incredibly badly burned, he's like, no, I wasn't though. And this
is actually from a separate injury. He said it was from a separate injury. And like a little kid trying to lie his way out of something. No. You got no, Mom. I didn't get this from that.
I'm dying of something completely different. And it's just that that pig-headedness, I think, is really legendary and to be celebrated. That's all.
I mean, two lessons here. Number one, and this one wasn't like directly realized, but it's always a little embarrassing when you have multiple copies of the same relic because, that means that somebody is an asshole. But then the second one is if you pull off a miracle, like finding the Spear of Longinus or whatever, never try to repeat it. Never try and double down on your miraculous
Absolutely
powers.
Not,
if you pulled off one capital and miracle, like just run with it. All right, so I want to talk about Jerusalem, and I want to talk specifically about what happened after the city was conquered. So say a little bit about what the siege was like, how they ultimately got into the city, and then this very gruesome, massacre that takes place once they're inside.
Yeah, Derek, do you want to take that one because I'm cognizant of the fact that we've been really going on and on.
Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You will tell this better than I will.
Okay. Well, the thing about the siege of Jerusalem is when we get the texts, one of the things that is happening is that people are attempting to big up how incredibly powerful their victory was. Is it hyperbole? Yes. But does it also tell us something about the massacre that happened? Also, yes. So, the sources that we have from the time will say, oh, the Crusaders were wading in blood up to their stirrups, or you couldn't get down to the streets because the streets were so full of blood it would come up to your knees. That is probably not true. But what they are saying to us with that is they are underlying how incredibly violent the siege actually was. And one of the things that is really difficult about this particular group of quirked up white boys is they don't know anything about local cultures. They don't understand anything about what it really means to be living in the Levant at the time. So they say, Jerusalem, here's the city that is owned by what we see as our enemies. The Ottoman Turks have taken over the city, and so everyone in here is my enemy. And, are a lot of those people Muslim? Yes. Were a lot of those people Jewish? Yes. And to be clear, the Crusaders are fantastic. I simply love to kill a Jewish person when I see one.
That's how they kicked it off.
Yeah, exactly.
Pogrom. Yeah.
Yeah. And having said that, though, they killed a lot of Christians, right? There were a lot of Christians inside of Jerusalem. And quite famously, one of the things that you do when you are a Muslim and you're taking over a country is you're like, we have got to keep Jewish people and Christians because we need to tax them with the jizya, which is the special tax for non-Muslims. And that's how they make money. So there were all kinds of Christians who were what we would now call Orthodox or even Coptic, Syriac, all kinds of different Christians that were living in the city that are also absolutely brutally massacred. And they just go in and they do not care. And they're just kind of going for it. It's a bit of a free-for-all and a frenzy. And it kind of wasn't what the people of Jerusalem were expecting either. Because, when they get taken over, which they've been taken over several times, in the past few years, that's just part of what's going on, which is part of why the Crusaders are there in the first place. They don't expect to be targets in quite the same way because they are in such an important religious city. And they're like, we all agree this is an important religious city and everybody needs to be here, even if we don't always get on. So there's going to be some kind of, veneer of hospitality towards those who might be there. And indeed, why would you kill the local population? Because it's a stupid move on the Crusaders' part because it's you cannot get enough white people in here to run Jerusalem. What are you going to do? You can't get half of Europe to repopulate this city again. So who is it that you're ruling over? But again, these people are himbos. These are men on big horses. They are not known for their brains. And indeed, if they were known for their brains, then nobody would have been like, yeah, why don't you go to Jerusalem right now? So we see this incredible bloodletting, essentially. And that's the real tragedy of what happens in Jerusalem. And it is violent enough that they are able to set themselves up as kings, because there's just simply nobody left to rule over. But even at the time, it was considered wild. Even when we see these slightly celebratory discussions of how violent the siege actually was, we still see some people being like, damn, bitch, you live like this about it, where it's it just doesn't seem necessary. You might have been a bit more careful, and there may have been ways of doing this that would have resulted in less of a loss of life, and indeed probably a more stable kingdom, I would argue, because it's in a place where they're so used to successive changes of governance. You maybe would have caught a few more flies with honey, if you just said, look, we're taking over now, but we're pretty nice people to be around, blah blah blah, then everyone go, okay, well that's fine because they're used to it, right? But you kill everyone, and everyone is like, okay, I now have a blood feud with these French people,
Yeah.
The city had just been taken by the Fatimids while the Crusaders were on the march. So to Eleanor's point about people being used to changes in power, they just experienced one, and another one would have been, an upheaval, but it wouldn't have been probably that big a deal had it not come with this massacre. I would add to that the siege itself after Antioch, fairly anticlimactic. I mean, it's like a week long. Doesn't really, there's not really a lot of until the massacre, not really a lot of action. The Fatimids just couldn't defend the city. Like they had, having just taken it, having just driven the Seljuks out, having expelled people from the city in the wake of that conquest, and also people who were, suspected of maybe having Crusader leanings as the Crusaders started to advance. Like it was just not they were not in a position to make a strong defense, and it's that to me is the surprising thing about the massacre that follows, because usually when you get like a big massacre at the end of the siege in medieval times is because people are pissed off that they've spent 6 months and these guys won't surrender, and fuck you, we're gonna kill everybody now, and that's not the case here. It's but it is one of the truly shocking things about it. That and the cannibalism are the two things that they kind of have to acknowledge.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the cannibalism
that people were uncomfortable with, but that they did.
I mean, I would just say about Jerusalem, I'm not saying that the Seljuks would have been perfectly fine with having the Christians there, but earlier in this process, the Fatimids, who were based in Egypt and were like the fourth player in this whole thing, they were trying to broker an alliance with the Byzantines and the Catholic forces so that essentially they would help the Christians take back Anatolia by attacking their enemies, the Seljuks, and then allow the Christians who came from Europe to set up a buffer state in and around Jerusalem so that that there could be a buffer between them and the Seljuks. And so this is not something where everybody in the city of Jerusalem was like, oh, fuck you, we hate all of you, you're all gonna die, if you get in here, it was the people, the leaders of the Fatimids were like, you can have Jerusalem, just take it. And if they would have agreed on it, that could have happened. But this atrocity, even though they excused it for whatever reasons because of past atrocities, real or false, it necessitated that atrocities would follow against them and wars would follow, and there would be this huge blowback against them, to use a modern term, because you can't kill people like that in cold blood to that degree and not expect some reprisal. That's not how it works, even back then.
And I think to Luke, what Luke's talking about there is one of the things that we come back to again in the series kind of multiple times is the notion of this campaign as this civilizational struggle between Christendom and Islam is it's just not there. It's not there in the record, and particularly on the Muslim side, there's no sense that they're treating this as like a grand battle between two religions. The Fatimids are more interested in fighting the Seljuks than they are in fighting the Crusaders. They're happy, and they make alliance with the Byzantines. I mean, they're on and off in alliance with the Byzantines against the Seljuks because the Seljuks are their enemy. You look at what happened at Antioch. It's the relief army that should have by all rights defeated the Crusaders at Antioch falls apart because the little emirs of the cities around Antioch, who are all kind of operating on their own volition because central authority is breaking down in that part of the Muslim world at this time, they all hate each other more than they hate the Crusaders, because it's a bigger threat. The guy in the city next to me who wants to conquer my city is a bigger deal than these, guys who showed up out of nowhere.
Every Muslim leader was far more afraid of Kerboga, who
right? Exactly,
ruled Mosul at the time, than they ever were of the Crusaders.
Those guys don't even know how to survive in the heat. Like, why would you be scared of them?
They were so afraid of Mosul, in fact, that when the Byzantine emperor, whose name's completely Alexios, when he found out that Kerboga's army was in the field, he took all of his troops back to Constantinople. He's like, nope, not doing that shit. I'm out.
Yeah,
and it's a similar thing in Iberia, as Eleanor said earlier about the Reconquista not really being a historical thing. This is something that we devised, that Franco came up with later on. Like, you get the same story there. You get people like, you get cities fighting each other, and Christians allying with Muslim cities, and Muslim cities allying with Christians to fight other Muslims. You get people like El Cid, who fights for whoever wants to pay him. It's just not like the lines as we think of them today, as like Christian versus Muslim. They just don't exist in that way in the moment.
Yeah, that to me has always seemed like one of the most pernicious misunderstandings about the Crusades, is that it was this like Samuel Huntington like clash of civilizations, East versus West, Christianity versus Islam, and so forth. When the First Crusade, gets going, almost immediately you have Christians and Muslims making coalitions against other groups of Christians and Muslims. Was it Baldwin who just conquered Odessa and then was like, "Hey, you guys go ahead."
He's like, "I've got mine. Yeah, it's fine."
Yeah, and they're like, "Wait, that wasn't the point. The point was Jerusalem. No, I just want to be the Count of Edessa. You guys have fun with that Jerusalem shit." And then it's also
and Bohemond
saying,
does the same thing after Antioch. It's like, this is cool. I'm happy here. And they all wind up making, kind of scrambling for land. Like Raymond, my favorite character, Raymond of Toulouse, is the last one like standing without a kingdom when the thing ends, and he sticks around and fights in the Crusade of 1101 and until he finally gets a territory for himself.
Raymond's a funny
didn't he
guy.
end up with Tripoli? I think?
Tripoli, yeah.
Yeah, Raymond's a funny guy because it's always funny when you can tell throughout history who the most annoying member of a group is.
Yeah, you can just see like,
because
this guy was a prick.
These are all of these people are basically world-renowned dickheads and assholes. Bohemond is so full of himself and has such a chip on his shoulder about his dad losing all of his land before he died. Like Hugh Vandemois thought he was like the cipher of Christ. Like these people, like they just think they're the holiest or the most like best men on the planet. So they're all these huge assholes, but they all hate Raymond. There's something about him. We can't tell for sure because we obviously don't have like that direct accounting of it, but like, he was annoying. He was stupid. He thought he was way too full of himself to the point that these other guys were like, get a load of this fucking asshole. Like, what is going on? Like, who does he think he is? And this is Bohemond, who's just going to seize the city of Antioch for himself. And he's even like, all right, Raymond, calm down, dude. It's a little fucking weird, man.
Yeah, it takes a certain type of talent to be a world historical asshole. To come down, 900 years in the books as being a huge dick.
Yes.
I was in kind of the unfortunate situation of when you guys were introducing, all the, Godfrey and Baldwin and Raymond and all of these guys. I'm in the position of having to do like face to name resolution based on the Ridley Scott movie Kingdom of Heaven.
No.
Right? Yeah, I know, because that it's got all the ahistorical elements and it's kind of a mashup. And
I love it though. So
yeah, good movie. I'm pro Kingdom of Heaven for the record. But the Raymond character,
the director's cut is top notch.
Yeah, that's the one.
The theatrical cut, not so much.
Yeah. But the Raymond character always seemed like there's also a character named Raymond with red hair in Kingdom of Heaven who is always being such a huge liability because he would just go off and raid and get the Saracens, completely riled up, and then the king of Jerusalem would have to step in and be like, "I'm sorry about that guy. Like, I promise. Like, I'll deal with him. He doesn't represent us." But anyway,
I can imagine Raymond as Brendan Gleeson. I mean, I think the difference there is that Raymond's stupidity or annoyance was just like something that really annoyed them, and they didn't want him to have more power or anything. Whereas Raymond de Chatillon, I believe, is who you're talking about from Kingdom of Heaven, and that guy was an absolute fucking psycho. Like he just went out and waylaid like random Muslims who just lived in the area, like because he hated them or whatever his specific reasoning was. But yeah, Raymond in the First Crusade is just like the guy that everyone's like, God, dude, why did we invite you? God, why did the Pope make us bring you? Oh my God, Mom made you invite me to this party, kind of thing. Yeah.
I also appreciated that moment with Tancred, where I kind of enjoyed the discussion of Tancred, where they're all making various fake promises to Alexios Komnenos about like, yes, we promise that we will give you anything, half of what we conquer or whatever it is, and then it's like Tancred's turn, and he goes, I ain't promising shit to anybody. Like,
it's just like so real for that. So real.
I appreciate the honesty in that.
At least he was honest about it. Like, well, one of them was kind of serious. Fuck, I forget which. It doesn't really matter now. But like, one of them was kind of serious, and the rest of them were like, I don't know. And Bohemond thought he and Alexios were going to like ride out together. Apparently, like a lot of them really thought that Alexios was like coming out to lead them, and it's like Alexios is in his like 50s by this point. He hasn't really been out like in the field in a while. Like I think somebody got their wires crossed on that one, because
this is the culture clash, right? Like Alexios is the emperor of Rome. He's expecting all these guys to come and kiss the ring and then go do what he wants them to do. But the Franks who show up on this campaign all come out of a context where the relationship doesn't work that way. You don't just bow and scrape. Like the overlord in a feudal context has obligations to the people underneath him, and so they make these oaths, and the expectation is that Alexios is going to fulfill his part of the relationship, where his view is, I don't have a part in this relationship. You're just doing what I want you to do. And they're not able to communicate. Let's say it's a breakdown in communications.
Alrighty. Do we have time for one more question? I know some people had some.
I do.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
We're good.
Great. So this will be a question for all the graduate students listening, which is, tell me about the primary sources. Tell me about the chroniclers and what it was like to read the primary sources. And then what are just some overall reading recommendations for people that want to dig into this more, besides, of course, going to your guys' podcast and listening to every single episode?
Oh, great questions, all. Hold on one second. I just want to Google the author of the book I like.
Okay. I'll start out with the sources. There are a number of direct main sources from the Christian perspective, that many of them that were on the Crusade themselves. Raymond of Chartreuse, another Raymond who is history's biggest. The spear we found is the real spear of Longinus guy. There was Albert of Eye, who wrote his account about 10 years later, but it was based on copious interviews with dozens of bishops who had gone, dozens of nobles and peasants. Like it is very comprehensive, and is usually agreed to be one of the ones that's closer to the truth, although there's some stuff in there that when you read it, you got to take it with a huge grain of salt, because Albert of Aix is also where you get the urban legend that Peter the Hermit was the one who thought the Crusades up, and the Pope was acting at his aegis, which isn't an idea that has currency anymore, but was the academic consensus from like 1105 until about the 1850s.
The Darth Jar Jar theory of the Crusades.
Yes, exactly. No, yes, it's exactly what it is. That's a good point. So you get that. So like if you're reading these sources, just know that like you got to take you got to take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. Anything that's quoted directly is definitely like made up after the fact, because they didn't really write down quotes like that, for the most part, unless they could find it in a letter or something. But also, I would suggest seeking out excuse me, the Jewish chronicles as well, from the Jews who suffer. I'm looking up the names right now. The Jews who suffered pogroms in Germany, especially as the first groups of crusaders were passing through. And I'm looking up those names right now. Give me one second. What
He's just
pleasing
like me for
audio
real.
that
He's just like for
everybody
me. He's just like me,
what
dude.
pleasing audio that everyone is listening to right now, from me. Yeah. So there is some of these descriptions of the Rhineland massacres. Godfrey of Bouillon has one. It basically, where the hell is it? There was something called the Mines Anonymous, and then the Solomon Bar Simpson Chronicle, which you can read online, and they go into harrowing detail about what happened during these pogroms and what they felt like and why they believed the Crusaders were doing it, either because they've been told that or what they thought. And I think it's a good thing to read, especially from all these heroic accounts you get, because it is genuinely horrifying, like just straight up Nazi Holocaust genocide type shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, and if you want to check out some of the original literature, a great place to start is Peter's The First Crusade, where he edits. It's got the Chronicle of Fulcher and a bunch of other ones, so you can go ahead and go right to the horse's mouth there. In terms of books that I really like Riley Smith's The First Crusade and the Idea of Crusading. So this is much more looking at it from a kind of scholastic or, a theological side. So how is it that people are putting these ideas together and what makes them go? So everything that we were talking about before, and what are the hinge points that make people decide that they are going to get on a horse or just start walking to the Holy Land. Really big deal. I also have to shout out Runciman's book, The First Crusade. He's a bit of a name for a reason. Absolutely like a really masterful work. Because I'm a social historian, really also like Connor Caustic's The Social Structure of the First Crusade. That's really interesting. Will let you know everything you need to know about not just the nobles, but people who are regular ass people who decide that they are going to go east as well. And then a bit of a newer one that I really enjoyed, which is called Shipping, Trade, and Crusade in the Medieval Mediterranean. And this came out in 2016, and it was a series of essays in honor of John Pryor. And this is a really interesting book that has stuff like, the socioeconomic implications of how ship construction happens. How do people feel about the single women who are on crusade? What does it mean for the Venetian shipping industry, things like this. So if you want to kind of see knock-on things, that's a really great place to go. So I realize I'm coming at you with some real scholarly stuff, but I'm telling you, a lot of these are really pleasurable to read, and if you're interested in it, I guarantee you can handle it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and Derek, I didn't mention any of the Islamic sources. Derek, would you like to talk about why there aren't that many?
Because they're like,
right,
what?
we
I
have
didn't even
kind
notice.
of a problem, right? Yeah, we have a problem with contemporary Islamic sources because, first of all, this just happened upon the Islamic world. It didn't wasn't something they had planned on doing. So you didn't have a lot of people, kind of chronicling it at the time. And also, it's not a huge deal for the Islamic world. Like, I mean, the loss of Jerusalem is significant, and like, it's a war, fine. And there are people who write about it later. But, bigger things are happening in the Islamic world. The caliphate's falling apart. In another, 120 years, the Mongols will be descending on the Middle East, on what we know as the Middle East today. There's just a lot of other stuff that's weightier that's happening around this time. So, I mean, there are a few sources that people come back to. The biggest one is probably Ibn al-Athir's complete history, Al-Kamal fi Tarikh. Ibn al-Athir worked for Saladin, who comes along later, about a century later, and retakes Jerusalem, but obviously is writing about the First Crusade in the context of Saladin and looking back at it rather than a contemporary account. But that's one that people refer to a fair amount. He also lives long enough to see the Mongols arrive, and that's really his main focus. That becomes his main focus. Yeah. There are other. Saladin's a big one because he understood the quest to retake Jerusalem as a legacy thing, and so he had people writing about it, writing about what he was doing at the time, and they have to look back and how did Jerusalem wind up in this position in the first place. So you have, in addition to Ibn al-Athir, Imad ad-Din Isfahani. Al-Isfahani is another one who kind of traveled with Saladin and chronicled the history of Jerusalem up to that point, or the period, when from the First Crusade to Saladin's time. There are a few later sources. Rashid ad-Din Hamadani was a Persian writer who worked for the Mongols, the Mongolian Ilkhanate, and wrote what is arguably the first genuine world history ever written. He obviously covered this. He wrote out an entire volume called The History of the Franks through the early 14th century, which is when he was writing. So he covers it a lot, but again, it's later, so it's not a great primary source. There are histories of the Seljuks, a lot of them kind of floating around fragmentary. We don't have, I don't think we have any full copies of these. They're typically called Seljuk-names, stories of the Seljuks. And they usually cover the Sultanate of Rum, which is the subset of Seljuks that the Crusaders have most of their dealings with. But again, they're fragmentary and hard to sort of deal with. From the standpoint of secondary works from the Arab perspective, the one by far that is most commonly cited, and I think is the best, is The Crusades Through Arab Eyes by Amin Maalouf. So that's the one I would recommend if people are interested in checking out the story from the opposite perspective of what you usually get.
Yeah, I've also heard the Maalouf text recommended by Roy Casagrande, who has also done some work on the Crusades. So, okay, great. Maybe it's not decided yet, but I did want to ask, is the series going to continue? Or are you guys going to do second, third, fourth Crusade?
If people buy it.
Yeah, if
people buy
basically if we get enough sales, we'll absolutely go on. Which I think actually the people are clamoring for the third Crusade, but you're gonna have to shut up and eat your vegetables and get the second Crusade.
Yeah, we're not skipping. We're not skipping.
No,
Crusades.
I'm not skipping the one that Eleanor of Aquitaine goes on. Grow up. Jesus Christ.
And there's a lot of stuff, like you can't understand the third Crusade without the second Crusade. So
not only that, the second Crusade
is.
The Second Crusade is insane because it starts to incorporate everything else. It has part of it is the one that starts to take part in the Reconquista as we understand it now, because they go into Portugal and take part of that back in Lisbon, but also up the Windish part of the Windish Crusade up into Scandinavia and Northern Europe was kind of tacked onto it too and pulled some troops away from it. And you're just like, wow, you guys won one of these and decided to just go whole hog on everything else, huh? And they were like, yes, we did. Thank you for asking.
And the rise of the knightly orders, like there's a lot of stuff to
the
cover.
Templars and the Hospitallers,
the
and
Templars.
Stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you want all that stuff, then you're gonna have to
get the Saladin,
the Second Crusade.
Past Saladin.
The one I would be clamoring for is the Fourth Crusade, which is
that's a
the
really
funniest
good one.
and the climax, really, of the crusading movement, the destruction of the Byzantine Empire.
At least 2 episodes on that, on the final siege of Constantinople alone. It's such a fascinating It's such a fascinating conclusion. It's so crass. It's so worldly. It just denudes the whole thing. Like we are no longer even pretending that this is a real like Christian thing. It is first as tragedy, second as farce, and now we're like the fourth time is like the most farce you can possibly fucking get.
Third time is LARP. Yeah.
And if you listen to this
it.
series, if you listen to this first one, you will understand why the Fourth Crusade was inevitable, or something like it was inevitable.
They invited the Pope to come take over Antioch and kick the fucking
They
Byzantines
did
out
not.
then while they were on the First Crusade.
They very quickly decided that they did not like each other at all, the Byzantines and the Latins.
Look, this shit is awesome, and we would love to get to it. But fundamentally, it turns out it's really hard to do a well-researched 11-hour deep dive into something. So we have to make some money off of it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so buy
heard.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
buy
welcome
it.
to Crusades.com.
Everybody, go spend your cash
There it
money
is.
on the Crusades and educate yourself about this fascinating period in time and how it's not what it's always been held up to be in public school curriculum or whatever. So, yeah,
It's bad, and all of everything that is happening right now in the world, from the genocide being perpetuated against Palestinians in Gaza to the immigration quote unquote crises and the way we respond to them all over the world. The genesis of that in the Western world is right there in the First Crusade. That's what it is. And I'm not trying to oversell it, but you can trace all of it back there. All of the colonialism and the imperialism and everything, it goes back there.
it's a
First.
primal scene for sure of Western colonialism, Orientalism, and one of the funniest things about the Crusades is historical imaginary crusades is the literal linguistic use of the term. I mean, crusade is as an adjective synonymous with like a highly principled struggle for some morally good thing, like a crusade against child poverty or a crusader for women's rights or something. But in reality, the Crusades were hugely opportunistic, often total material and military land grabs and just coalitions of whoever you could cobble together in order to get what you wanted at the time. And like to the enduring legacy of Western involvement in the Middle East, it's the Iraqis in the 2003 U.S.-Iraq war called Bush a crusader, saw the U.S. involvement in the region as an extension of this thing that's been happening for a millennium, and I honestly feel like if we go back and reanalyze the Crusades, we'll see them more accurately for what they were, and that you can always like track like whether someone is like a cultural conservative or someone is more left-leaning just in their spontaneous attitudes towards a project like the Crusades. Because even today the right tries to cling to this idea that the Crusades were justified or and it's clear from examining the records that absolutely we're not.
Yeah, and I think exactly what you're saying is not only do the right tend to see them as justified, but they see them in terms of this ridiculous idea of a civilizational or cultural struggle that we simply do not have the evidence for. So I think that is one of the reasons why spending some time really looking into what was going on during the Crusades is useful. It helps to fight these narratives about a kind of grandiose project and an idea of an ongoing holy war that we're still living in the midst of, which remains just a kind of fever dream in the imaginations of the worst people in the world.
It's such a civilizational struggle that Alexios reached out to the Fatimids and was like, hey, let's form an alliance. It's such a civilizational struggle that the people of Europe 200 years later would literally write homoerotic fanfic about Richard the Lionheart and Saladin meeting up and having a tryst together. Like,
And
if
kissing.
if this is a civilizational struggle, we need to redefine what that term means, because they did not it was not the same thing, not at all.
Yeah, especially just for me, that moment when Baldwin just dropped out right at the beginning, like, no, it's cool.
That's
You guys
fine.
keep going.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Not
Yeah.
civilizational. I'm going to go hang out in Odessa. If I can do an agreement with Korboga so he doesn't kill me, that'd be fucking fantastic.
It's like, have you seen Armenian chicks? Damn.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. Derek, Luke, Eleanor, and in absentia, Danny. Thanks for coming on the show. Can we do one last plug for the two podcasts, and we'll call it a day?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to hear more specifically about medieval stuff, you can check out Luke and I at We're Not So Different. You can follow us on the socials at WNSD Pod.
Fantastic.
And Danny and I talk mostly about U.S. foreign policy and world affairs, but we occasionally dabble in history and sometimes history, older history like the Crusades. And we're at American Prestige, www.americanprestigepod.com.
Thanks.
And
I actually,
welcome to thecrusades.com.
That's right. Welcome to Crusades.com.
I actually came to it because I was a longtime listener for American Prestige. So that's how it came onto my radar. And big recommendation for the American Prestige podcast. A fantastic analysis of U.S. foreign policy. So, all right, that about does it for today. So thank you guys again. And yeah, hope we can talk again sometime soon.
Yeah, cheers,
Thank
William.
you.
Cheers.
Bye.
If you have found this episode helpful, informative, entertaining, or otherwise interesting or appealing, I suggest you come on down to my Patreon page where we have more content specifically on recent American history, the global war on terror, as well as some more personal podcasts that I'm not quite sure how to put out into the broader universe yet. So if you want to help me, or if you want to learn more, please check out the Patreon and have a wonderful rest of your week.